think there's nothing left to do really other than introduce the first speaker. So first of all, I want to invite my father-in-law, Mr. Eddie Hartley, to share something. He's a graduate of chemical engineering, and he joined the Unification Church 40 years ago in 1974. In the UK, he had some experience of leading centres, also being involved with business bookkeeping, and served as a business leader in the UK, and then moved to Germany, where he spent a couple of years doing economic research, 6 years doing sales and finance for Salo, 7 years as a shareholder for some machine companies. Wow. And since 1996, having returned to the UK, he's served the British movement in various capacities as a trustee for the last couple of years, and director of Family Federation for, I think, 8 years, a trustee of also not just Family Federation, but also HSAUWC when it's existed, and also a member of the Finance Committee since 2009. He's as a trustee, he's also a bookkeeper for IRFF UK, and has more recently become IRFF UK's fundraising coordinator. So Papa Eddie likes to talk about his many hats. So I don't know which hat he's going to put on. All of them, maybe. But yeah, let's welcome up Papa Eddie.
Okay, well, given my business background, I looked at the Constitution from an application point of view, from a usability point of view. Business people are very used to analyzing scenarios, a what-if situation. What if we were asked to do this? What if that situation arose? What would happen? Also, if scenario A occurred this, but if scenario B occurred that, and these kind of practical considerations. So I looked at it not from the point of view of whether it's at all valid, and if I took the words from this morning, then of course I may come to the conclusion that my words are no point anyway, because it's probably not valid anyway. But let's say that there is certain validity there. I'm sure the people who spent an awful lot of time putting this together wanted to do it with a good heart. I accept many of the comments that were made this morning about why it was made the way it was and when it was published the way it was. But what I find very disappointing from that document is that it's incredibly difficult to see how it can be properly implemented. There's constant reference in this document to such and such a situation will be governed by law. So I went looking for the law, and I didn't find it. Colin was referring to this morning. He'd read my synopsis. It says in Article 15, the law is based upon God's true love, which is very good, and also upon Father's words. But then I'm aware of the fact that it also mentions the books, yes, it mentions the 3 books there, which are the basis for Cheon Guk. But I was thinking in terms of the fact that Father's got 1,000 volumes of speeches that have been published, and some maybe haven't even been translated into English yet. There's an awful lot of material out there. I'm not suggesting that Father's been contradicting himself over the years. He's been incredibly consistent. But I'd like to know which of the words that he spoke in the past could be condensed into a book of statutes, could actually be interpreted as a book of law. Now, I looked up the German Grundgesetz, as it's called. It's the basic law of Germany, and it's 146 pages and many, many paragraphs, and it covers a wide range of situations. Because, of course, a book of law, if we're going to accept the rule of law, has to be all-encompassing and cover all kinds of situations. So even in a modified version, according to our considerations this morning, if the Constitution were to be seriously taken as a vehicle for Cheon Guk, there'd have to be an awful lot of appendices in there explaining how different situations would be handled according to a heavenly principle. I don't find that in here. I know there's a lot of other points were made. There's there's a lot of definitions that are missing there. Even the definition of what is full completion of Cheon, what does it really, really mean? If you think about it, of course, this is a theological point. What we're actually imagining and expecting is that through the second coming of Christ, ultimately, whether it takes 10 years, 50 years, or 200 years, the whole of mankind will be connected to the true parents. It's an amazing expectation, considering the way that Christianity and Judaism and other religions have developed or not developed. And it's a very, very serious moment that we're sat in here to really get this right then, because it's totally important for future generations to get this right. So the first thing I'm concerned about is the definition of this law, because it's referred to so often. I'm also concerned about the fact that there's no mention whatsoever in here about having a council, even on a continental level or a national level, which considers constitutional matters. Constitutional court is usually required in such situations once you have constitutional law, which you have sort of, but not adequately. We would need a representative in every major country of the world that would handle questions, problems, which will naturally come up. Look at the number of amendments to the American Constitution. Many, many, because of different situations, different subtle differences in the way that society operates. It requires, therefore, some adjustment and some modification to things. So we'd need one person at least who can handle these kind of questions, because situations will arise. Of course, as a trustee, I'm also very concerned about the fact that there's no mention whatsoever in this document about the role of a trustee body. There are a few countries in the world, possibly Germany, possibly America, certainly the UK, who are founded as charities and have a trustee body. It mentions here decisions can be taken together with the national leader or with the national leader's agreement, but actually decisions to do with properties have to be, according to UK charity law, taken also with the trustees. So they're of a certain size. So therefore, this is a glaring point, which is missing in the document for me, totally ignoring that legal framework by which some countries, not just the UK, operate. So, as I say, talking about laws just briefly, I'm aware of the fact that law is something which exists everywhere. There are also laws in the spirit world. Every being in the spirit world, there are spiritual laws everywhere. Every being in the spirit world is subject to spiritual law, from the highest to the lowest. I don't have a problem with laws. What I have a problem with is bad definitions. And there are many, many bad definitions. Now, I had a discussion over lunch, and there is a certain opinion that perhaps the upper councils mentioned in this body, in this work, the Constitution would not have any constitutional rights to affect the use of properties, for example, in UK, that a group of people in Korea could decide we'd like to suggest another use of buildings in Britain. But I was thinking about what kind of scenarios could exist. Now, this may not happen, but for example, when Father came in 1978, I personally went 3 times or twice to a building north of London with him, and at that time he was thinking of buying a university. Now, a university is an educational institute, and the primary purpose of the Family Federation is education in the broadest sense, divine principle, but also many other things. So for us to open and finance a university in Great Britain would in no way violate any of our objects or a charity law, but it would cost a lot of money. And I would be wary in the sense of thinking through all kinds of scenarios, whether some kind of edict would come from above, find a way of putting together £10 million in Britain, however you do it, whichever property you want to sell off, and go and buy this university. Now, this happened in America with Bridgeport, for example, as far as I know. So I don't think that's likely to happen. And to be fair, Father could have done that at any time during his life, because according to our trust deed, we were supposed to respond, that's point 3 of our trust deed objects, to any charitable directions that were given by the founder during his life. And then there's a clause to what happens afterwards. But, I would be wanting to know, I'd be wanting to have assurances, I'd be wanting to very clearly know how things will practically happen. So for me, the main problem is that this hasn't, I think they call that in the banking world stress testing. This thing hasn't been stress tested. It hasn't, a lot of work has gone into it. We're suspicious of its purposes, or why it was put together the way it was. We're suspicious of the top heaviness, yes, many things like this. But I don't think it has been stress tested enough in the sense of what if, that situation, and there isn't the representation in this country to object or to handle those kind of suggestions, questions, all that sort of thing. So my main point is I don't find it, apart from being possibly ominous, I find it patently unusable as it stands. That's my main point. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some interesting points there about difficulty in implementing this document, reflecting on where True Father's words, which words of True Father we can use to make a possible statute book, identifying many definitions which are missing, also reflecting on our continental and national situations and whether or not there would be any constitutional committees there. Are there any responses from the floor or questions, Mr. Stevens?
Hi, I'd like to make a comment about something you said early on about the laws or judgments being based on God's love. We saw in Christianity that it didn't take long to go from what Jesus preached to the idea that it's justifiable to burn people to death just because they disagree with you. And the reality is that the people who represent what God's love is will be the people that are in power. So I see in this constitution a terrible danger of that. It's wholly reliant on the quality and the enlightenment of the people who are in power.
Absolutely.
And so I just feel, it's not really a question, but I just feel that I feel actually worried when I read phrases like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Mr. Gray?
Do you feel that this has really got? Do you feel it's really got a bearing on the future of this movement? That there's so many holes in it. Do you feel it's got a bearing on?
Oh,
that?
I do. I think it could be totally misused. The document, yes, it could be. I mean, we heard those conspiracy thoughts this morning, but I mean, I as I was listening to the presentation this morning, I was finding myself having difficulty to argue with to oppose the arguments. They were very well presented, and there are some real issues. Yes, it could be abused, possibly. Depends. There's just not enough. There are not enough safeguards in there. I think you want to say something, Ollie?
Judging by your talk just now, the Constitution is clearly a mess. Do you think it's even amendable? Or does it just need to be started again?
It's a fair question. I think it's amendable, yes. I think it is amendable. But it needs a huge amount of work done on it, really, to honestly take into account all of the objections which have been raised and to truly handle them in a responsible way. It'd take a lot of work, yeah. But I think it's amendable. I think Colin wanted to ask a question. Okay.
I don't know how to put this, but how on earth were they allowed to make this mess? And therefore, do you really think they're going to listen to us? The answer surely is no. Therefore, what on earth are we going to do? I mean, to be quite honest, I doubt if the thoughts that have been expressed here will get to the people who wrote that.
I think you're possibly right there.
And
Ron.
in my own experience of the sort of culture of older members in Korea, it's it's very difficult to approach them. Therefore, it would seem the only way is to somehow connect directly with True Mother.
I mean, for example, there were two people went over to Korea to get involved in discussions, whether they were listened to or not, from the UK. One was Jack and one was Mark Brown. And, you know, Mark has a legal background. I would have hoped that Mark would be here to be able to, that's not a criticism of Mark, but I would have hoped that he'd be here taking copious notes, or he can watch the video afterwards, and writing, you know, some very clear concerns to, if nobody else, the Western members of the you know, the Supreme Committee, and just saying, look, there's a lot of concern here, but I'm not even sure how much that's going to happen. So, yeah, it's possible that we're going to have some difficulties.
Should we go to Mr. Turvis's question first, and then to Mr. Simon?
Yeah, actually, this isn't a question. It's just a response. Farhad and I were talking in Venice last week. Thomas Wang, Reverend Wang, talked about the Constitution, and he started by saying, kind of a little enigmatically, the Constitution will come into practice in April, but it will take us 3 years to learn about it. So I didn't know whether learn was a euphemistic term for until we are able to enforce it, or until we who wrote it kind of have learned how workable it is. Yeah. And I kind of got the sense that maybe in the back of his mind he was saying, well, you know, don't worry, guys, we'll work things out over the next 3 years. But I don't know.
I got the same strong impression. So, like, don't worry, you guys in Europe, you've got 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, Eddie, you made reference to a banking analogy.
Yes.
And
stress testing.
So stress testing, yes. So I'd like to just to make another analogy from the realm I worked in software engineering. Mm-hmm. That perhaps in relation to the inadequacy of definitions in the document, this should perhaps be viewed not as a bug but as a feature.
Okay.
I would say as well as what Ollie said, that yeah, the Constitution could be amended and fixed, but that would require. I mean, we could offer all the suggestions, but those suggestions, I don't think they would ever get to the place they need to get in order for them to be implemented. So it's not just a question of whether the Constitution could be amended in theory. It's a question of whether the practice.
Whether it actually would happen.
Would it actually?
Yeah, yeah.
Should we go to Mrs. Hartley at the front, and then and then Mr. Gray?
My understanding is that at this moment in time, this whole, what's the word?
Dispensation.
Constitution. I couldn't think of the word, sorry. Constitution is set up to protect True Mother because of the problems in the True family. I don't know if that's true, but she needs some kind of protection there. And also because, well, okay, True Mother could go any time. We don't know. There has to be something in place. But I think we're all seeing that it's far from perfect, and it needs a lot of tweaking, a lot of maybe rewriting. But I think temporarily it's just a temporary thing. So maybe we shouldn't have to worry too much and panic about it. And things may change a lot in the future as things pan out. So.
Well, I have to agree with my wife, of course, that because we discussed. No, I don't have to, but I do. No, we agreed that a constitution at this time in history is important. It's just unfortunate that the one that has been produced, albeit with an awful lot of effort, is just has so many holes and undefined things in it and lacks. But the fact that it is needed at this time, I don't dispute. Yes, I think Patricia's quite right. But it just could have been done better. But and this point about the Westerners not being listened to, this is a very unfortunate point, and I don't have an answer for that. Don't think any of us do, really.
We'll have the last floor question comment for now.
Yeah, it just been my experience that with Koreans, and we all have had experience with Korean leaders. Basically, you have to sit down and really argue. You know, you have to really make a really strong point. And I really see this point about the protection for the integrity of the movement after Mother goes to the spirit world. Something has to be there. But I think the Western input really has to be there very strongly, because otherwise it won't be a serious document.
No.
So somebody actually needs to represent all of these views and sit down and argue.
Yes.
And
That's
stay
right.
there until it's taken on, and then they'll take it on board.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to have that representative person who would go to the Constitutional Court in Korea or whatever, who has a legal mind, ideally, who would represent the concerns of the people here. Yeah, I think actually Colin would be very capable of doing that. If he wasn't doing other things, he put himself forward very well. And I think if Ollie was involved, that would be very good. Otherwise, Mark Brand, of course, was, I'm thinking people who have that kind of analytical mind, who can put across the point, but also defend the defences, defend the objections. Oh, no. Aha, you haven't understood what I'm saying, etc. So I think we need to have that kind of representation, and if we don't, then there'll be an awful lot of discontent. Yeah, I think that's it, really.
Yeah, thank you for that reflection. We'll have more opportunity to respond, so please, if you have any burning thoughts or feelings, please jot them down and we'll come back to them.